To the capital of South Africa, we go where government is launching the Disability Rights Awareness Month, which runs from today until the 3rd of December. Now, the awareness campaign aims to counter effects of stigmatization, prejudice and stereotypes. Now, we understand, as we see, the Minister in the Presidency for Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities is currently at the lectern. Let's go there now live.
In this sixth administration, this department in his presidency, Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities, he has done so by creating this ministry to accelerate the national agenda for these groups. The mandate of this department is to lead on the socio-economic transformation and participation of women, youth, persons with disabilities through mainstreaming, I'm repeating, through mainstreaming, advocacy, innovation, monitoring, and evaluation. As for the welfare, those who need support, here is social development. Those who need to be closer to government in terms of serving government, here is Deputy Minister Chikunga. We are all here. So there are no half-class citizens in this room. We are all participants, even those who are outside. All those that you see inside here of the sector and outside need from all of us, abled and disabled, just one thing: appreciation and love. Appreciation and love. No favors, no action, but just make our life moving as God would have wanted to. Although much progress has been made in the sector in the past 25 years, one of the items we had to review yesterday of Beijing plus 25, since Beijing is 25 years, we also...
All right, we're going to come back to that speech in a short while. That was the Minister in the Presidency, Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities, Maite Nkoana-Mashabane, launching basically a Disability Rights Awareness Month that runs from today until the 3rd of December. And this month-long campaign basically aims to raise awareness to the harmful effects of stigmatization, prejudice and stereotypes that people who have disabilities experience. So it's one of the campaigns that also aims to celebrate, I guess, individuals who have overcome prejudice, societal barriers, and hardships to excel in their chosen fields. We want to go back to the launch of a Disability Rights Awareness Month now.
Keep ears. Operation Big Ears. Nothing must happen about you without you. And we are here to say we do not have any other mandate except that. I listened to Professor Mkize that yes, of the 7 priorities, you have chosen to shorten them to 5. But this one of gender-based violence, you think it's happening still much, much more in disabled people than in any other sector. 2 weeks ago, a daughter of my cousin was getting married from Skukuni. In Skukuni, there's some special place, for some reason, closer to Moshate, like really on the doorstep of the Kamoshato Mogolo Skukuni. I've never seen so many blind, disabled people and short of, hearing and so on, so on. But they procreate. Because I was young at that time, it wasn't my business to ask if it was consensual. I still want to believe now, as a good Christian, that it was consensual. But I can tell you that none other than those I saw when I grew up would look after their own children than the so-called abled people. I learned a lot from them. Socialization of our people from all sectors need to start young and need to start at home. It must be in the communities. It must be in our schools, in our churches. I'm referring to places where our people used to feel safe in the past. That if I was being chased by tortoises and I enter a church door, then I feel safe. It shouldn't be that that's where I should now feel Mfundisi is the happiest. Now that I've landed, I am very sorry, Mfundisi. I'm not discriminating against you. I'm just saying, keep it up. The medium-term strategic framework of 2019-2024 was approved by Cabinet last week. For the first time, elevates rights of persons with disabilities across all 7 national priorities. But I've learned in South Africa that some documents are as good as they are written. If we do not do the advocacy, if we do not do the monitoring, if we are shy to make the noise that we're supposed to make, these things might take much, much longer. Particular attention should be given to economic liberation. Economic liberation is new in South Africa. It's only 25 years, if it's happening at all. Worse than for persons with disabilities. So through this expanded access to public procurement, decent work, business, ownership, enterprise development, and access to land. When Minister Zulu was still in the Minister for Small Business Development, I once walked behind her in a mall and I heard some very excited young people saying, if you don't pay people who work for government, she will chase you. She chases people who don't pay for services. I felt very proud of you. So it's not just about access and all the things that I'm talking about here. On Monday or Tuesday, before we left for Addis, we were sitting with the Business Association of Women in Business and the President, and they were telling stories, horrifying stories, on how they get so unpaid that they have to shut down their businesses. So improved access to universal education, life skills, skills for development and training remains a priority, not only for the next 5 years, but that's what the MTF say. This will be supported by targeted measures to ensure early development screening of all children for development, so that delays and disability with concurrent individualized early intervention services for children with disabilities are noted much earlier. Government also acknowledges that disability affects the whole family and not just the individual. and has therefore prioritized the rollout of a basket of social services to caring for children and thus adults with disabilities, regardless of geographical location. A few months ago, we were visited by a representative of the UN. She came to see, she saw us. I think she visited different departments. She must have visited you also, Minister Lindiwe Zulu, in your department, talking to us about albinism. One thing I wasn't too sure if I agree with her was naming of children. That maybe we should, as South Africans, stop calling naming our children Mpho. Because that already makes them vulnerable. I was thinking, I don't know in my family if there's any, when I say family, I mean my brother Nkoana family, if there's any nucleus family that doesn't have Sfiso or Mpho. So if we don't rejoice the gift that comes from God and we think that makes them vulnerable because they happen to be disabled in one way or the other, I found that I didn't necessarily agree with her. I explained. I took the opportunity to explain to her that when we are happy, we give children happy names. If we are not so happy, we call them Sello. But not because that we're going to be crying throughout their lives, but she must appreciate that Mpho, it's Mpho. So I thought it was important that Cabinet has also prioritized the incorporation of universal design requirement, norms, and standards, including to retrofit existing buildings, transport, ICT systems, infrastructure in all infrastructure and neighborhood development grants and tax rebates. Children and women with disabilities experience increased vulnerability to gender-based violence and femicide. We will therefore ensure that targeted interventions are put in place in the National Strategic Plan of the Gender-Based Violence and Femicide to manage the increased risk and ensure that perpetrators are brought to book. This is inclusive of ensuring that we strengthen and expand protection measures to protect children and adults with disabilities in institutionalized settings such as school boarding facilities, mental health care facilities, as well as residential facilities. But as government, we know it is not only what we do that makes a difference, but also how we do it. The Department of Women, Youth, and Persons with Disabilities will be strengthening the embedding of our gender, youth, and disability responsive planning, budgeting, monitoring, evaluation, and auditing across government. This includes the providing national government departments with feedback on the inclusion of disability priorities in the strategic and annual performance plans. We'll also be supporting the development and implementation of innovation and interventions for the priorities mentioned before by mobilizing our social partners to participate in strategic partnership. Our partnership might be largely those who are not in government, but in particular, the departments that we work together on day-to-day. Program Director, in conclusion, meaningful change starts with each of us at a level where we are. It requires of us to reflect in what we are doing, not on not doing. Our own attitude towards persons with disabilities, the language we use when we speak to persons with disabilities, we need to create enabling environment in which children and adults with disabilities can thrive, can self-actualize, and can dream, experience joy, hope, and intimacy. Let me repeat, intimacy. It's not wrong and it's not evil to be disabled and fall in love. It's okay, but it should not be coerced. It should come naturally. One of our tasks is to ensure that we leave no one behind and that we start by reaching those furthest behind first. We must do so by acknowledging the compounded marginalization experienced by persons with disabilities, whether as a result of race, gender, identity, age, orientation, the type of severity of impairment, geographical location, and socio-economic status. Raising awareness of the rights of persons with disabilities, celebrating their achievements, highlighting the physical and attitudinal, economic, communication barriers and experience, and informing society about enablers required to remove the barriers is ongoing campaign. Disability Rights Awareness Month will be therefore over the next 5 years, that is from the 3rd of November to the 3rd of December, in the next 5 years, be strengthened through and around the year, integrated with campaign to inform, educate, and share good practices. But also to listen, because half the time we want to be talking to. We don't want to be listening to good advice for those who live this experience on daily basis. So the Sixth Administration is committed to changing the lives of persons with disabilities in meaningful ways over the next coming 5 years. As I said, we call on our provincial and local spheres of government, our captains of industry, our organs of civil society, our faith-based organizations, and on disability rights activists to join us in structuring action-oriented partnership that will socially and economically liberate our fellow South Africans with disabilities, so that they could also join us and sing Uhuru. Mpiri wote haole. I thank you.
Let us thank our Minister, Minister Nkoana-Mashabane.
I get so happy that I have to be reminded that we are and we are officially launching the Disability Month. Today is the 3rd of November. I thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you very much. Let me attempt to summarize what the Minister has been saying to us. The Minister is the custodian of disability issues, according to the policy of this country. Let me also say that I want to put something into context here. When the ruling party, the African National Congress, came into office for the 6th administration, there is something that it said. It said, growing South Africa together. In that together, the African National Congress is correcting the historical misdeeds that date back to eternity. In the way of saying that, you will recall that the disability movement is part of the mass democratic movement in South Africa. So the phrase, nothing about us without us, was framed in the mid-80s, I would like to believe, wherein we have started long time ago in the 80s, going forward to correct what has been done wrong by all of us. So this is not just something that today it happens that we are starting a month of the disability rights awareness. No, I mean it's something that historically has been evolving, and over time it is being strengthened. One of the things that the Minister pointed out to my ears was that black, rural, and disabled women are the most hard-pressed in society, more than anyone else. Yes, of course, there are inequalities, but then we need to focus, our interventions as government accordingly. That will then bring us to our next speaker. We are going to ask the Acting Director General of the department to present to us the key messages for the month ahead, as well as the poster series. Thank you, David. The Director General is Ms. Shoki Chamala. Thank you.
Ministers, Deputy Ministers, clergies present, our distinguished guest from the disability sector, good afternoon. Let me see what I can see properly here. I'm going to take you through some of the key messages that talks to the Disability Rights Awareness Month, the one that commenced today up until the 3rd of December, with a theme that says, Together Building South Africa, Inclusive of Disability Rights. Key messages, it's about break stereotypes, fight prejudice. During this month, we reflect on the challenges faced by persons with disabilities, as well as their achievements and goals. We reflect on what inclusion can do for society, as well as what persons with disabilities have accomplished for themselves. We want to strengthen partnership between government, business, and civil society towards addressing the challenges faced by persons with disabilities and releasing their human potential. We need to educate South Africans that persons with disabilities are competent, skilled contributors to the growth and development of our country. Leave no one behind, that's another key one. Government is committed to do more to reach out to all people with disabilities and ensure that no one is left behind. Every person with a disability must have access to the same opportunities as everyone else so that they can realize their full potential. This might require additional support measures to remove barriers to participation. Equal opportunities for access to quality education and employment will ensure that people with disabilities are lifted out of poverty. Working together, we can ensure that people with disabilities systematically and consistently benefit from our development. Regarding white paper on the rights of persons with disabilities, the white paper is a call to action for government, civil society and private sector to work together and ensure the socio-economic inclusion of persons with disabilities. The white paper informs a major legislative and policy review across all spheres of government, as well as development of disability rights legislation for all South Africans. It commits duty bearers to advance the rights of persons with disabilities, and it holds them accountable if they fail to do so. It requires that duty bearers remove discriminatory barriers for people with disabilities, but it also obligates them to ensure that this community participates in the planning, in the budgeting, as well as service delivery value chain of all government programs. In terms of posters, the following posters were designed in collaboration with the sector and are to be used as an awareness-raising and advocacy tool. They will be released across the country between this period, that is the 3rd of November and December. You've got them, they're reflected there. My biggest disability is your attitude towards me. If you can, Minister, I know it's almost at your back, but it's just to give it a bit of a glance. You will see that poster. The next one says, "My disability does not define my abilities." This is so profound. The next one is, "With the appropriate assistive technologies, I too can work." The whole issue of reasonable accommodation, appropriate assistive devices, that kind of support is required. And in this instance, I'm happy Deputy Minister from DPSA Mechikunga Oteng, that's one of the issues that we would like to play an advocacy role on. My disability does not stop me from achieving my goals. I am capable as well. Invisible disabilities include depression, bipolar affective disorder, schizophrenia, dementia, and other psychosis, psychosocial disabilities, intellectual disabilities, autism, dyslexia, epilepsy, hard of hearing, etc. Know me for my abilities, not for my disability. Not all disabilities are visible. Mental health is as important as well as physical well-being. I want to learn like everyone else. Inclusion. That is critical. Your inability to understand South African Sign Language becomes my disability. At our police stations, at the hospitals, all those frontline desks or service delivery focal points, our inability to understand sign language becomes your disability. Learn to communicate with me, not at me. I excel if you remove the barriers that marginalize me. Different, not less. Accept autism. That's beyond disability. In terms of the key events, we've listed them. You already have some of your documents with yourselves. It is quite clear on what exactly will be happening in week 1, what will be happening in week 2, and how to access this information on some of the media platforms that we have, because it does state that there are a number of events planned across the country by both government and civil society, targeting rural areas as well. It goes up until week 3, where focus is on the launch of dyslexia, week 4 on children's parliament, interface with 16 days of activism as well, and we are what will be happening on National Day per province. Some of them still have to confirm their venues and all, but all of them have taken full responsibility to lead in this area of work. These are our social media links and hashtags. I would leave it as such for now. And some of you do have cameras, and some of you are already familiar with this because they were sponsored by yourselves. And before I say thank you, I want to leave it as is until the next person comes on board, and you keep an eye on it. And I thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mayor Shoki, the Acting Director General. We'll proceed with the program. As we've seen now, the posters. We're going to leave them for now, so I can view them for a while, and also take little notes from the messages that come from the posters themselves. Next on our program, I want to introduce the Deputy Minister of the Department of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities, Professor Sengiwe Mkhize, to give us the call to action further to this launch.
Program directors, ministers in our midst, and deputy ministers. We also appreciate the leadership of the sector and the clergy in our midst. I need to say something about Bishop Paul Verreyn. A few weeks ago, I went to a very early morning church service. I don't know why I went to a church at 7 o'clock. And he spoke about the role of the church that they should play in fighting gender-based violence. He said in the past, when they were involved in the struggle for liberation of the country, if something like this violence that President Ramaphosa was talking about was so prevalent, they would have been out in the streets in numbers. It was really challenging the congregants in terms of saying they have a role out there. So when we were planning, I thought it would be good to have him because of his influence to really put into action what we see as a challenge in putting together the configured Department of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities. And I thought it's just important to mention that whatever we struggle with, we don't realize that people out there are fighting for our vision and mission. I think our minister has said a lot about the pillars of the formation of the department, coming from the time when the president issued a proclamation. So I just want to reflect on the experience we had yesterday. And I did report to the leadership here briefly during the briefing. That was the first time that I briefed even our minister, that my impression was that we worked very well. There was a common understanding in terms of critical issues where the sector felt that we have been slow in realizing their rights. We're in agreement, but above everything, there was a commitment from all of us and the willingness to work with the 6th administration in ensuring that we change the lives of persons with disabilities in a meaningful way. And so that was a commitment that we both made, that we will work together. Another important point which I think is worth mentioning was the commitment to mobilize civil society, in particular the rural communities, informal settlements, and all the areas where people are at risk of being left behind. We also made a commitment that we have to work to roll out the program within the district model of the district development model, as it will enable communities to tap into the skills and expertise of persons with disabilities for the greater good of the entire community. I think if I understood well, the desire was that whatever the sector is fighting for is not only for them, but is about the transformation of society so that we ultimately create the South Africa we want. We agreed that more needs to be done in strengthening intergenerational dialogues and work targeting, in particular, the 18 to 25-year age group. Basically, the feeling was that they have got special needs that are not often discussed in audiences where they are senior citizens. I also briefly met with the chairperson of the National Albinism Task Force, formed during the recent visit of the United Nations Independent Expert on Albinism. That you can just stand so that they see you while I'm talking. Is the new chairperson. Welcome. The task force has begun its work in developing a 5-year national action plan on albinism in partnership with government. Since we met for the first time, we committed, Minister, that we'll make an arrangement so that they come through to the department for a full briefing of how their stream should develop and cut across all the priorities. We took note of the sector's appreciation that their voices matter and that there are high expectations now that the disability coordination function has been relocated back to the presidency. They wanted to see value in terms of political power that the department have as a special program in the presidency. Our national disability policy, the white paper on the rights of persons with disability, it provides us with a detailed roadmap to achieve this. So it's really the cornerstone of all what we agreed to be doing, especially when it comes to removing barriers to access and participation so that they could experience the inclusion in society as laid out in the presentation by the minister. I would like to assure South Africa that I take this responsibility very seriously, and I will dedicate myself to work very hard in support of the sector. We'll over the next few months see a change of pace, a change in the level of responsibility expected from every public servant, and how this should be displayed in ensuring that we deliver services to all South Africans, including those with disability. As it has been said many a time, we have moved away from a silo mentality. When we say we will support the sector, we are not talking about our department alone. We talk about a coordinated effort across all government departments and entities. We need the participation of our traditional leaders, our religious leaders, our cultural leaders, women's organizations, youth formations, and civic leaders to work with us in building a South Africa that respects and upholds the rights of persons with disabilities. The theme for this year's Disability Rights Awareness Month speaks to our intention to build a South Africa that truly belongs to all who live in it, black, white, men, women, with or without disabilities. That is the South Africa we fought for. That is the South Africa we must build together. That is the South Africa we all want. And that is the South Africa persons with disabilities want. Disability Rights Awareness Month will focus on mobilizing local action for local change. We need to ensure that every person with a disability, regardless of where they live, what their impairment is, their race, gender, age, or socioeconomic status, can feel the change happening in their lives as we break down barriers which marginalize and isolate them. I'm encouraged by the many activities that will be taking place, but I just need to quickly talk to how, as the department, we see a weekly program starting from what we are doing today. During this coming week, we will be focusing on local action, which ensures that children and young people with disabilities are empowered to chart their own destiny through access to quality lifelong learning. I'm not going to go to details as to who are stakeholders that we need to partner with. I will quickly mention what we expect to happen during the second week, but bearing in mind that whatever is happening, we agreed that the sector cannot work alone, even at a local level. There are always established players that they have to partner with. The second week of the 10th to the 16th of November, our focus will be on a built environment accessible to all persons with disabilities. Too many of us take freedom of mobility in our cities and towns for granted, not realizing that these same environments often contribute to the isolation disabilities are subjected to. And again, I'm not going to go into details, but will be informed by the realities in our surroundings as to whom do we partner with for the promotion of the theme of week 2. Week 3, ultimately, what every South African seeks is to live with dignity, being economically independent, the ability to look after themselves and their families, being able to contribute to the economic growth. And that is top in terms of the priorities of the 6th administration. So the focus for week 3 from 17 to 23 November is therefore on persons with disabilities as equal players in building inclusive economies. In other words, we spend a lot of time talking about economic inclusion and really showing also the barriers, even when people have been taken in a workplace, that there will be no concerted effort to make sure that they move beyond entry. Often people will be frustrated to a point where they resign or they are pushed out through all sorts of barriers that are created. So it's an important area that was emphasized. Week 4, as it has been said, that it will coincide with 16 days of activism. But what is important in our discussion, we said we don't always want the sector working in isolation. The examples that came from a sector, like access to justice, we did say to them that's what the NSP is all about on gender-based violence and femicide, is to look at the access to criminal justice. So as part of a desire to be part of a broader action of the programs of the department, cooperation and collaboration at a local level around these issues, but featuring the disability-specific barriers. It will help a lot in branding not only the program of disabilities, but us as the department as a whole as to how the programs connect. The disability sector, during our engagement, shared valuable insight into the compounded risk and vulnerability they have. They also shared some valuable insights on possible solutions to reduce risk and strengthen access. Our call to action for this week is to magistrates, court managers, police station commanders, and all members of the judiciary to ensure that persons with disabilities, despite their impairment, have equitable access to your services by putting in place and making known which reasonable accommodation support is available. We are also calling on all our communities to take action and to protect vulnerable children and women with disability by standing up for them, by being vigilant, and by supporting them in reporting abuse. We furthermore call on principals and boarding facility heads at special schools to strengthen measures to protect the children in your care, to report.
All right, it's 1 o'clock. You're still watching the agenda on SABC News. Government, of course, launching Disability Rights Awareness Month. Minister in the Presidency, Maite Nkoana-Mashabane, together with Deputy Minister in the Presidency, Professor Mkiza, addressing the media there in Pretoria. Disability Rights Awareness Month will run from the 3rd of November today to the 3rd of December. Let's take a look at your headlines.